Good morning. Morning. All right, good to see you guys this morning. We definitely want to welcome you to our staff meeting this morning. If you have any comments, please pick up a comment card that you can give those to Ms. Davis this morning. We're going to open the meeting with just a reminder to all of our council members to please speak into your mic as you're speaking so that the audience can hear you, and also it's being recorded that they can hear you as well. Roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Mr. Claxton?
Here.
Dr. Coker is excused. Mr. Cooley?
Here.
Mr. Corley?
Here.
Mr. DeVilliers?
Here.
Dr. Gorey? Dr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Javia?
Here.
Mr. Jenkins?
Here.
Dr. Joffrion?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Dr. Joseph?
Here.
Mr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Martin has a proxy. Mr. Delcom?
Here.
Dr. Narcisse?
Here.
Dr. Ortling?
Here.
Mr. Powell?
Present.
Ms. Tanner?
Here.
Ms. Trustclair? Here. Dr. Williams? Here. And Mr. Williams is excused. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'd just like to welcome our guests and also any Bessie board members. I think I saw Mr. Morris walk in this morning, and any other board members that may have overlooked. Definitely want to thank you for being here. Also to any visiting superintendents, we have a packed house today. And also we have some special guests this morning. We have LSBA Level Up League, the Superintendent Academy members and participants, and we definitely want to recognize you and thank you for being here today as well. And so again, we're going to go ahead and get started with our approval of minutes. So, can I get a motion to receive? I move. Approve, excuse me. I move. Motion and a second. Are there any comments? Anyone opposed? Those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? New business. Item 3.1, consideration of an update regarding the Louisiana Comeback plan. Superintendent. Can we get a motion to receive?
Mr. Powell?
Second. Second, Mr. Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I wanted to share with the group what I shared with Mr. Jenkins earlier. The original agenda that we produced for this meeting, we felt like was probably an hour to an hour and 15, an hour and a half minute agenda. And so I had made some other commitments as a result of that. And I had suggested that we have an afternoon superintendent's meeting with the accountability group from LAS and the academic group from LAS. But upon Mr. Jenkins' request, we canceled that meeting and we went ahead and put the accountability item on the agenda per Mr. Jenkins' request. There are only a couple of ways that items can go on the agenda, either through a Bessie referral or through the department putting something on the agenda. So I just want to not put it on the agenda because it's such an important issue. But I'll say all that to say, we're going to try and move through the first components of our agenda this morning fairly quickly, so that we have as much time as possible for the last item, which is the accountability item, which I think is what you all want to share most of the information on. But I am going to have to leave right before noon. So I just wanted to say that up front. So we had a really strong year last year in terms of year-over-year academic growth. Really proud of you and all of your systems, your teachers, certainly your students for the work that they were able to do. We saw in grades 3 through 8 a 3% increase in our mastery rates year over year. That 3% increase in mastery in grades 3 through 8 is the most significant year over year increase that we have seen as a state since 2016. And so I'm really excited about that work. I think that one of the reasons why we were able to do that is because we had a consistent focus across the state in a few key areas based on the comeback plans that everyone built that were surrounding the 3 buckets of attendance and well-being, academic recovery and acceleration, and professional learning. and then using your stimulus dollars, particularly in those areas, to make sure your students are well and driving them forward academically with the supports for your teachers to be able to do that work. And so I think that's one of the reasons that we saw that 3% increase in grades 3 through 8. That equates to, give or take, about half of the overall learning loss that we saw as a result of the pandemic and the storms. And so we know that we still have some level of recovery to do. But then even once we get to that pre-pandemic level, we all should agree that we have acceleration to do from there to get, continue to get better outcomes for kids. And so we are in Louisiana Comeback 2.0 this year. And Dr. Timmel is the lead for that on our team. And so what I asked her to do is to come and do a brief presentation to you all today, just thinking about what are the technical requirements here, what a timeline look like, and what are some of the more substantive issues that we need to make sure that we're attending to based on our latest rounds of student data, so that we in fact can see that ultimate full recovery and then are being positioned for that acceleration. So Dr. Timmel.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. Quintina Timmel, your official Louisiana Comeback 2.0 captain and trusted advisor relative to student improvement.
We are trying to find her a captain's hat.
This work is really exciting for me because it connects me with system leaders and allows me to talk about the work that I am most passionate about, and that's acceleration and recovery for students. And so since we released the template September 1st, I've been engaging with your system leaders, and we've talked about the most pressing student needs. Of course, Dr. Brumley already mentioned grades 3 and 4, because we know those were our first and second graders during the pandemic, and so they really missed out on some of those very foundational skills. And so we've spent time on calls, answering questions, asking them about their funding, and just really trying to be very supportive of those that call in. We've offered an extended office hours beginning this week through next week. So you have about 7 days remaining, business days remaining, before the comeback plans are due through EGMS. That's September 30th. And we've released a set of resources. It's located on the Pandemic Relief Guidance website. The most recent and our newest resource is our FAQ document, which has been compiled from questions we've received since we've released the template. And a lot of our questions are fairly technical, but we are getting questions. One reoccurring question that I feel like I've had to really redirect some of our system leaders is, can I just copy and paste what we did last year? And of course, our goal was to make this process as simple as possible, with the exception that your data should drive the decisions that you are making when you think about how you are supporting your students around attendance, academic recovery and acceleration, and professional learning. And so it's what we always do when we think about our school improvement processes. What do we continue? What do we start? What do we stop? Based on our student information and our student data. And so those are the type of conversations we've been having. The other thing that I want to point you to, these are just the technical, procedural aspects. The plans will be submitted through EGMS. The review process will take place through EGMS. And so as soon as we get those plans in, September 30th, we have about 5 Louisiana former or current educators who are part of our review team, and they will start the review process. We've been working with them, asking them specifically to pay attention to the things that we care about the most, and that's listed within your guiding questions on the plan. And the other thing that we are asking them to pay attention to is that the funds and the way in which you are directing your dollars through EGMS are also aligned with the changes that you're making in your budget. So, for those of you that's familiar with David Letterman would do at the end of his show like the top 10. So I'm giving you a top 10 review checklist, but I won't go over all 10. I will call out numbers 1, which is simply what we said: review the data, let the data guide your decision. We We always talk about being data-driven. I've changed that. We are student-driven, but data-informed. Let the data drive the decisions that you are making for your students. We've already called out number 2, which speaks to our 3rd and 4th graders. We need to make sure that we are within our plans addressing their needs, because our data is telling us that those are the students that was most impacted by the pandemic. And so we want to make sure that you are, as a superintendent, when we think about the questions that we are asking before the plans are submitted, what are the questions we're asking for the people we delegated this task to? Do we see 3rd and 4th grade students really called out, especially in that recovery and acceleration piece? Number 4 speaks to having a cross-functional team that's coming together to make these decisions. So not just letting the decisions around our recovery efforts live with one person, but there's a team of people working to make plans. Number 5 speaks to our attendance work. We've, through Twitter, Facebook, all of our social media outlets, even superintendents reaching in and letting us know that they're really focused on attendance recovery and well-being for our students. And so we're excited, and I know that we'll see more about that in your plan. So that's definitely something that we want you all to focus on. And number 10 is make sure that as you all get close to submitting that plan, that you have a process in place to get input on what you are, how you're revising your plan and the new content that you are putting in your plan that is a federal requirement. And so we just wanted to make sure that as we call this out, that you are following those guidelines and that you are very focused and intentional on the recovery efforts for your students. And that concludes.
Dr. Timmel, since we have a full audience today of educators, I don't want to miss an opportunity. So if you're on your cell phone, if you would just mind listening for one moment. Something I care deeply about, and I think is our most urgent need, are these 3rd and 4th graders. These are the students who, when the pandemic closed our schools in the spring of 2020, were kindergartners or 1st graders. And so they had a third of that foundation, those foundational years interrupted. We know that the following year had too many interruptions for them, pandemic-related, storm-related, as well as the next year. And so when we looked at our English results on LEAP last year, every grade in 3 through 8 saw an increase year over year, apple or orange, of course, in ELA, except those 3rd graders. And so I wasn't surprised by that, and what we don't know is how far did we already bring them, what gaps had already been filled. But it should point to the fact that we have to be really concerned with this year's cohort of 3rd and 4th graders. And in those plans, making sure we're thoughtful about, are we offering them the high dosage tutoring that they need? Are our school days structured in a way that they have access to intervention or extension or those small group tutoring opportunities? What are we doing in the afternoons, mornings, weekends, whatever it takes? Because this really is about these cohorts of kids, but it's what will their experience K-12 look like, and what will your experience with them K-12 look like over the next decade. But more importantly than that, if we don't shore these deficits, this is a lifetime of an impact for these children. And so I just want to call it out and ask that with everything in your power, make sure that we are attending with a laser focus to these 3rd and 4th graders, because many of the experiences that they would have had under normal circumstances were compromised because of the pandemic and the storms. And I don't want that to be lost on us as educators. And so I implore you, just please, everything that you can do to take care of this year's 3rd and 4th graders.
Any comments from the council?
Just one question, Dr. Timmel or Dr. Brumley. Can we get a similar set? I know we have in the past, but there's the slide here, number 6, that provides that dashboard of where we're at relative to the 6 critical goals. Will we get that by district? Can we get that? I know sometimes when we're calculating our own data, sometimes we don't get the exact number that you might get as a state, so it's very helpful that we're all measuring the same as we're setting goals and tracking them for the future. So, thank you.
Any additional council members, any comments? Hearing any, we have a motion and a second to receive. Those in favor? Those opposed? Okay. Item 3.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators regarding school attendance data. Do we have a motion to receive? So moved. Motion by Mr. Javia and a second by Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Dr. Singleton will give this presentation.
Good morning, Ernie Singleton, Department of Education. Bessie in August asked the department to provide more information regarding student data. At the next Bessie meeting, we will have a revision to Bulletin 741, asking schools to link to the Louisiana School Finder website for their attendance data. This will not go into effect until December 2023. Because at this point, we are in the process of revising the School Finder for this attendance data, so we will provide you additional instructions next fall or next summer with how to go about doing this process.
Do we have any comments from the council? Any comments from the council? Do we have any comment cards? Okay. We have a motion to receive in a second. Those in favor? Those opposed? Thank you. Item 3.3, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 726, Louisiana Standards for State Certification of School Personnel regarding school nurses. Motion to receive. Motion. We have a motion by Mr. Carlin. Second by Dr. Jeffrey, excuse me. Okay.
Dr. Chasson will provide this information.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. She'll provide with our reading resources too.
That's on the next agenda item. This one's on school nurses, so that would be a further stretch for me to get school nurses to reading.
She may want to plug her math refresh. Math is the language of science.
A brief update on school nurses. At the August Bessie meeting, there was some amount of discussion about a potential shortage of school nurses across the state. And so from that time, the board directed the department to consider updates to the certified school nurse requirements to include experience requirements that may assist in filling this particular area of certification. Further, our board president, Mr. Garvey, directed the department to present policy updates for the October Bessie meeting. So we just wanted to bring this to you all today, really for feedback and comment, which we are really trying to get a handle on, is there a shortage on school nurses? If so, where in particular? And so we've done some amount of initial surveying, some amount of initial conversations, and are not finding a mass shortage of school nurses across the state. And so it could be that there are particular pockets or areas of the state where there is a shortage for school nurses. So wanted to let you all know that that is something that we are digging more into, and we plan to just bring the board an update in October, not a policy shift around this. This is something that we work jointly with the Louisiana State Board of Nursing, because Bessie and that board have jointly promulgated rules around this area of school nursing. And so one proposal that you all have in front of you, that is just something really to think about and for comment today, because this is not being brought to October Bessie, as we really try to dig more into, is this a shortage area, what else might be done? One potential pathway is for LPNs to serve in the role of licensed nursing support staff. And so this would open up a new type of school nurse certification that would allow for an LPN to work under the supervision of a registered nurse in this support staff. And so you have some language in front of you for potential policy that we might explore if this is something that we feel could open up the field. So just interested over the next month in any feedback, comments, anything that you all may be experiencing as school systems in regards to school nurses, if that's something that would help you all, or if there are any other potential policy shifts that we could bring to the Louisiana State Board of Nursing, and that we could bring to Bessie that may help if this is a concern and an issue for you all.
And just for comments, there was a survey that was done and sent out to council members for their input. And so at this time, any comments from the council members? A question? Dr. Alexander?
I just want to be sure I'm clear. Right now, this is still in progress. It's not being brought as a policy change yet. We're still trying to figure out what is going to be a final draft going.
Exactly, that is right. So right now, you just see in front of you what's underlined in that policy. That page of Bulletin 746 is just a potential policy shift to add in this new type D pathway for LPNs to work under a registered nurse. But we really feel like we need some further exploration to see, would this even help you all? Do you have LPNs who could serve in this? Do you have a shortage, and would this be helpful? Is there something else that maybe we could do that would be more helpful? So we're really in that exploration phase right now.
Do you anticipate some sort of like deadline, some sort of timeline to actually finalize something that you want to bring to this?
So we were directed to bring back an update in October. We would like to bring, if there is a policy shift needed, or if that is a desire of the board, we would like to bring that to the December Bessie meeting. So we'll certainly continue to collect feedback and input from you all and bring it back to you before we propose that policy to the board.
If I could add further, this really stemmed from a public comment during another item whereby an individual commented that the 2 years of experience was a hindrance in getting school nurses certified and being able to find the school nurses. So it was really out of a public comment, and so with that, Mr. Garvey recommended that the department look into, is this 2 years of experience really a hindrance, like Ms. Chesson said, for you all, like the person testifying was saying, or is this just an isolated event? So that was kind of how it came to be.
Any other I have a comment or question. Just for clarity, so if an LPN will be under the direct supervision of the RN, will they still be able to work independently at a different location, or will they have to be at that same location with RN, potentially?
My understanding is they would work at the same location as the RN, under their supervision.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Yeah.
We do? Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand with the current policy versus this recommendation. So I hear what you just said, we still have to hire a nurse to actually still work with the LPN in that position. So I'm just trying to understand, how does that help from a staffing standpoint?
It may not, which is exactly why we're bringing this to you all.
An LPN to be certified, not necessarily staffing at that time. It just will, in the long run, help in getting more individuals certified to be nurses.
Steve.
I think also, my understanding, RN can do certain things and LPN can't. So in this situation, if you have an RN that is overseeing, it would be better for all of us if the LPN could be on the campus by themselves. So that would be something to really look into, because I have 5 schools, I have 5 nurses. I'm lucky I have 5 RNs. But I could not have 2 nurses at one school working in a rural community like that. So if that could be worked out, it'd be wonderful, I think.
I'd like to add to that. Is there a consideration for long-term planning where there's a pathway for LPNs to get their RN certification? And whether it's through partnerships, or is there any support that the department could provide for that for a more long-term solution?
I think these are great recommendations that we're happy to bring to the Louisiana State Board of Nursing and discuss with them, both of these.
Dr. Chasson, what would be most helpful for you to capture the information? Like, would it be if someone has particular items, just to shoot you an email following?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, just a relevant comment. I worked in a system where there were something called health aides who worked under RNs already, who had no intention of becoming a registered or certified nurse. But if you're talking about a staffing issue, with appropriate training, a lay person can work under the direction of an RN.
Any other comments? Yes?
Yeah, just one last comment I had was, is there a possibility in this discussion, outside of the discussion of the positions, maybe there could be guidance for us on the services that could be provided? So if this is something that's considered maybe, what are the scope of services of LPN versus RNs, that may be more helpful as we think about, what the school is, what the services kids need. We're talking about it from a physician standpoint, but I was thinking about services to the children or services.
So those are regulated by the state licensing board, and it's certainly something we're happy to provide. That is important.
Thank you. We have a motion to receive and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Item 3.4, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 1566, pupil progression policies and procedures regarding literacy interventions for students in grades K through 4, and an update on literacy resources. Motion to receive? Motion. Got a motion received by Mr. Alexander. Got a second by Mr. Cooley.
So before Dr. Chasson moves forward with the proposal, I want to give a little bit of background to the group of where this proposed policy is coming from. The last legislative session, there was a bill that was considered that would have called for the retention of students at the end of third grade if they were not reading on grade level by the end of the school year. That bill narrowly failed in the legislature. As a result of that, we had a board member who had some interest in Bessie also considering a similar item because of this board member's belief that we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can in terms of the reading levels, particularly as a result of the pandemic. And so in consultation with the board member, in consultation with our team, we did not feel it appropriate at this point for a Bessie policy to go out and recommend the full large-scale retention. But we did feel like there was a place, given the stimulus dollars that everyone has available, to look over the next couple of years at students who are in elementary grades. And if those particular students who are pandemic-impacted kids are not reading at the end of grade level by the end of the school year, being able to score at a certain level on the screener, that they would have access over the course of the summer to 30 additional hours of support from a teacher who has undergone the science of reading training, et cetera, to provide them a little additional support while you have some federal dollars and are able to do this. It would sunset after the summer of 23-24, which we tried to align with the availability of your stimulus dollars. And so I just want to provide a little bit of context of the origin, and then Dr. Chasson will probably want to say a little more.
Certainly. So the policy would look like an addition to Bulletin 1566, which is our pupil progression policies and procedures bulletin. And it breaks down into a few simple parts. One is that, to Dr. Brumley's point, this would occur during the next 2 summers, really taking into account when you all have some stimulus funding available for summer programming. The majority of our school systems are already standing up some really fabulous summer programming that we've seen the last 2 summers that you all have done such an incredible job with. And so this would look like administering an end-of-year literacy screener to identify kindergarten through 4th grade students in need of these summer interventions. The summer interventions, the policy states that this would take place over 30 hours of intensive interventions. And really in looking at research about high dosage tutoring and hours for interventions, that 30 hours really of intensive intervention done by a quality educator with effective materials really based on student need has shown a huge impact on student achievement. And so that's why that 30 hours really is the right amount for that intensive intervention to take place. The policy also spells out that children who do not attend that summer program who have been identified would be retained in that grade level the following year. I think a piece of this is Dr. Brumley kind of frames up where this policy request came from and how it came to be. But I do think that it also ensures that you all can ensure better attendance in your summer programs for this specific population of children, but also just highlighting that that summer can take place and look different in a variety of ways based on your own local context. But the requirements for that intervention are spelled out pretty specifically in the policy. Also, I think important to note is that should this policy pass board approval, then we would plan to produce a plethora of guidance and resources. You all know that we already have. Our literacy division has been hard at work the past 2 years. And we would produce end-of-year guidance for what that end-of-year screener would look like in administration. You all would have the option to administer either what you already have chosen from those 4 beginning of the year screeners. You could administer the end of year that matches that one. If you don't have that and you're not already administering an end of the year for that, then you can use a free option that will be able to make available to you all. And we would also produce really specific grade level guidance for those 30 hours and what that intensive intervention should look like by grade level for those 30 hours to meet those individual student needs. A really shameless plug now for some of our literacy resources would be that we would of course encourage folks to use the LIFT kit, which is our literacy intervention toolkit. So really identifying and pinpointing those individual student needs and then intervening in those specific areas. So we would produce really specific intervention guidance by grade level and make that freely available to everyone to use as well.
Thank you, Dr. Chesson. Do you have any comments? Thank you.
I have 2 questions. One, we run into these problems where some of these kids won't come to summer school. And I know in the past we've been able to provide RTI during the school year on some of our other policies. Would that be available to do sometime also for this?
This policy is silent on what summer looks like and leaves it to the LEA level to really interpret summer and what that looks like in your own local context.
Because I'm just thinking with all the literacy training we're doing with our kids in the school, and I think what we were reading is, and correct me, a minimum of 5 kids with a literacy coach or teacher, that it could be done as an RTI through the school day. It's just something in my mind, because sometimes we can pull and we can't get kids to summer school. Now, the funding we've had over this session has been wonderful. I've had summer school and loved it. It's been great. So that is a plus. And then the second part, the literacy screener we're using, we're not going to use LEAP for this, correct?
Correct. We will not have, this doesn't span all of the LEAP grades since this is K4. And it does not, and also we won't have the data in time.
Yeah, because the time coming back, and then the way I see it, and I think I understand, LEAP is actually not grade level, it's above grade level. So we want true data on what is grade level. So, you know, I just want to make sure the literacy screener we're using is reliable. Thank you.
Jeffrey?
Dr. Chasson, so Dr. Ortling and I participate in the Early Literacy Commission, and we had lots of discussion recently, but I don't recall retention being something that was mentioned during that discussion. Was this added after that commission meeting?
Yeah, so there were 2 components that were added based on feedback, and that those would be bullet 4, or number 4 rather, which is if the child does not attend 30 hours of training, then they would be retained. And that grade level. And then the fifth being for students with exceptionalities, their participation in the summer program would be based on an IEP team decision, if the IEP team felt like that was in the best interest of the child.
So I know that most school systems have been running really effective summer programming, especially with all of the funding being provided from the department as well as the amazing guidance. Is retention sort of just the threat mechanism, and I hate to use that word, to ensure that students participate? I mean, there's so much research on retention and the harm it does for students. And especially with the science of reading training, and we know that reading is a progression. Learning how to read is not something that's necessarily static, and it's something that we should look over a multitude of years as students are making progress. I do have some concern with the required retention, and would just love to hear some thoughts on the rationale.
Yeah, so we know that there was a bill filed the last session that narrowly failed. We anticipate that bill will be forthcoming again during this particular session. We see this in the interim until that discussion can happen as a somewhat of a compromised position, but it also ensures that children who aren't reading at grade level do get the additional supports that they need.
I'm wondering if this is a recommendation from the department, or whatever may be driving it, could the wording be that retention may be required as opposed to required? Traditionally, we use our school building level committees to make decisions based on a variety of data points, to Dr. Dufion's point, but to base it off of that single assessment in whether or not the parent is able to, get the child back towards the school. So the absolutes are what kind of create the issue there, I think, when you say they have to be retained, when educators know what the research says about multiple. If you read this, I know if according to Dr. Romney, it was sunset in 2 years, so we're saying a kindergarten through fourth grader could be retained, would have to be retained for at least 2 years in the event that they did not meet these requirements. So I just wonder if the language from the department there wouldn't be a consideration to say may be retained instead of required to be.
Now, just a point of clarity, and you didn't confuse this, I just want to make sure that it is. Like, it doesn't say at the end of the 30 hours that there's an additional screener that they have to pass for promotion. It just says that attendance is required for the 30 hours. But the second component being, we're happy to take that back to our board and have further discussion.
I too would like to see some flexibility in the language, giving some consideration of school building level committees. I'm looking at the requirement of the teacher. We've struggled the last couple summers to get folks to teach summer school. I mean, we've had to be very creative. So I too am uncomfortable with the shall be retained for a variety of situations or circumstances. I would agree with some flexibility and authority to school building level committees to make those decisions.
Yeah, I have a question about the screener. Is that a state screener, or will districts have options on which screener they get to choose?
So we would use the same 4 options that are available for that beginning of the year screener. Acadience, reading, Dibbles, Steep, and Step.
So I'm wondering, if we were to move forward with retention being required, what, if any, good cause exceptions would be a part of that, up to and including students with IEPs, or if they achieve a certain amount of growth during the course of the school year?
So the students with exceptionalities, that would be an IEP decision, period. So when you're talking about student on the IEP, that IEP team is going to make that decision on whether the student is participating in 30 hours or not. So that would be held constant. We have not placed in the policy any other good cause exceptions at this point. If you have any particular that you think are worthy of our consideration, certainly give us that feedback, and we're happy to take that back to our membership for further consideration.
I'd like to point out in the bulletin provided, Title 28, item number 5, it does call it that way. So we would definitely need to pay attention to that.
And I think looking at English learners as part of that would be appropriate also.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just get a point of clarification on, you say you collaborate with your team, is that the LDOE team, or is this a legal team that's giving the advice that this has to be put in policy?
That this has to be put in policy, this
The
doesn't.
retention piece.
It doesn't have to be put in policy. None of this has to be put in policy. This is a recommendation based on collaboration with one of our board members, based on the last legislative session.
So that,
But in terms of collaboration, yeah, I mean, we're in consultation with our legal team and all of this.
so there's no legal precedent to say that the retention has to be there. I think the majority of us have a concern with the retention piece relative to, typically that you'll see common growth the year after retention, but years later, there are no growth. In fact, there's a lot of, obviously, the research that Dr. Joffrey mentioned shows actually a regress in growth. And then, like Dr. Chasson and the Early Literacy Commission talk about often, the multi-tiered layers of support for students while they are engaged in those texts is more appropriate. And I truly feel holding students back with this requirement, this language, would further hinder growth of our students when we're trying to do the opposite.
I would suggest just keeping in mind that retention is only if they do not attend the 30 hour.
Yes, just a couple of points. One is going to be teachers. We're actually paying a load of money through ESSER to increase what we normally would pay. And it's still hard to get people to do this. Looking at what the data may produce and the number of kids that can fall in this category, we're actually running the risk of not having enough staffing to cover the number of kids that could be in this category. We're hoping that we all do well, but that's a possibility. The second piece is going to be, we're doing the end of the year, and maybe I just didn't understand. We have the end of the year screening to determine if they should go in there. And then they have to go for 30 hours. Sitting in front of somebody doing something for 30 hours does not mean that they're going to acquire the skills that we're hoping that they gain from them actually participating in this. So I would suggest that maybe we come up with another screener at the end of this process, and not necessarily that it becomes pass or fail, but to give us data points to determine whether or not what we're doing is actually producing the outcomes that we actually want. If we just turn them loose and saying, you sat down for 30 hours, I know a ton of kids, including myself when I was that age, that would sit down there for 30 hours, do my time, and then move on to the next grade. So we're actually trying to make sure that this works in some way, shape, or form. Just having kids sit down for 30 hours is not going to be the answer. We have to have some type of assessment at the end to determine if there's a match between what they did at the end of the year assessment, what they have after the 30 hours. Thanks.
So, just for clarity again, my understanding is the reason why we're looking at this is because there was a law or proposed statute that didn't pass, but a BESI board member has requested LDOE to go ahead and try to put something into policy. In the event that this law does pass in the future, we will already have it. Is that my understanding?
Halfway, right. So there was a law that narrowly failed. That will be coming back up with probably additional momentum. And so we have a board member who is interested in BESI considering that bill that was in its form that failed at the BESI level. And so this is an individual who is concerned about the foundational reading of children. And so in our conversation together and amongst our team, we felt like instead of taking that bill and saying, BESI, let's consider that bill and implementing that at the BESI level, that this might be an alternative to that bill that might get to the same place without the same process.
Gotcha. So, and just for the record, we're all concerned about foundational literacy skills for our students, I think. So there's not a debate there. I think there's also not a debate about what the research says about retention.
Well, there is a debate there. And if you don't think there's a debate, I can take you to.
Well, there's clear research on some very negative impacts there. So point taken, there is that. But there is pretty clear research about it. So I think that at least from my perspective, putting something into policy that might go hard against what some pretty clear research says about mandating retention without necessary points like what Dr. Gray has suggested, where we're truly looking at whether or not kids are growing or just whether or not they're just in attendance. I just, before this becomes a recommendation from administration, if that's where it's going, I just would like to know that there's some pretty intense look at the research behind exactly what's being put there. And as many of us have said already, the language of thou shalt versus thou may, when we have educators that can look at this and make maybe a better decision than retaining a child for an entire year when there are, as Mr. Claxton brought up, other interventions that we can do throughout the school year as well.
So this, just for clarity again, like at this point, it is a recommendation from administration based on conversations with our board member who had an initial interest. But that's one of the reasons why we have it here is to continue to gather feedback.
Mr. Allison?
Yeah, thank you. So it sounds like that there's some merited conversation around this that still needs to be taking place. Is there any way that we should maybe consider, I don't know what that would be right now, not pushing this in October, maybe letting something similar to this while we rework it and create some new language around it and gather some input here, maybe delay it? I mean, does it have to take place in October? That's my question.
Pushing it forward in October was around making sure that systems had enough time to understand and appreciate what was coming in the upcoming summer.
Would December be a drastic change in that?
I think that's more in terms of how much space do we need on our end to develop the resources to support you all, and then for a successful implementation. I still think that, there are, now we may not agree on everything back and forth, but I'm still welcoming conversation around it, in the next short order. But if we can't get to a place, then maybe, I'm not opposed to passing it to December.
And keep in mind, it takes 4 months for policy to become rule, so it wouldn't be in effect, really effective rule if we pass it in October until February, at the best case scenario.
But I pretty much consider in principle, once it gets through that first stage, that we can make preparations for that.
Questions? Or comment? Can I just speak to the timeline and being prepared for this? I think pushing it actually doesn't help anything because, our plan right now, of course, I can only speak for DeSoto, but it's a 2-year plan to have all of our teachers trained in the science of reading, which if this goes into play, we're going to have to reevaluate that plan and put some things into place that provides for teachers to become trained before the summer, which pulls teachers out of class, impacts instruction now. So while I agree with the premise of this proposal, on this policy, I think it does provide for some concerns along the way and just preparedness for us as systems to speak to what Dr. Gray was talking about. Just from a staffing standpoint, that's already kind of at a critical situation. So just wanted to bring that.
Mr. Corley, is your concern that you're raising here around point 2, around the provided by a teacher who has completed the required foundational literacy?
Yes. Well, I agree that should be the case. We are not prepared to do that in mass for the summer of 23.
So there has been a number of concerns, and one of the recommendations I'd like, someone would like to make a motion perhaps, to just look at some of these things so that when it goes back to the administration, Department of Ed, Betsy, so that they know what our wants and needs are centered around the number of teachers, science of reading training, retention, may retain or shall retain, email, alternative assessments, and literacy screening. Those are some of the things that I wrote down. So we perhaps that in motion so that we ensure that those things will be done. Yes.
We've also included in that various options to complete the 30 hours, other than just summer school, because there are things that you can do during the school day that can account for all of the 30 hours that would be required. We just need to give schools more options.
I guess my question about that, Dr. Joseph, is if we believe that to be best practice, why wouldn't we already be doing those things?
Because you make the assumption that summer school, that families will be able to bring their kids to summer school. You make the assumption that kids don't take summer trips or go spend the summer with their families because of some situation that may occur. We're not taking into consideration any types of situations that would occur with families over the summertime. I mean, there are valid reasons why kids do not attend summer school. And we've had that issue for a long time. I mean, we have valid issues why kids don't attend after-school programs, but we still provide it for them. I'm just saying that we need to provide or have more options in the policy that would be able to afford everyone the opportunity to get all of the kids that need the assistance that they need.
Any other comments or?
Mr. Jenkins, Dr. Gray mentioned teacher vacancies, and so I just want to make a plug here at this point. That we are trying to collect information around teacher vacancies across the state again, because we were able to use that information that we conducted through a survey last year at the turn of the year to determine we had, 2,520 vacancies across the state, but that was with I think a 70-ish% participation rate in systems. And then so we had to make assumptions based on the other 30%. So just a reminder, if you haven't been in communication with your person who handles your data and your HR director, that information needs to go in EdLink 360, because we need to grab that information, because it is our ability to grab the information, to know the information, so that then we can be helpful back to you. Now, granted, it's not a mandate that you go in and put your vacancy data into EdLink 360, but if you're wanting us to be able to help you, then we need to be able to go to Betsy and to be able to go to our legislature and say, these are the vacancy numbers, these are where these vacancies are existing, and here is potential policy to help in these areas. So I just want to make sure like you're in communication with whomever is handling your data and your HR so that we can capture that information.
Mr. Chair,
Any additional comments?
just a side note, Mr. Roman. You aware of all the issues with 360 that we submit, it becomes an issue, we submit, it becomes an issue. Those kinks aren't worked out yet. I mean, I know in some districts, their data coordinators have quit over this, and mine's about ready to pull her hair out. I hear from her every day. So how close are we to having all that fixed?
So we had a couple of antiquated systems that really could not be serviced. They weren't serviced. And so with some of the funding that we had available, we saw an opportunity to repair or correct that issue. Now, yes, have there been bumps along the way? Yes. I think certainly those systems from the initial bumps are much better, and they'll continue to get better. But if you have specific things, like I'm happy to take those.
We do. We turn it all the time, and it comes back, and it goes back. We can submit all the corrections, and we have 0. And then when it's submitted, we get back 40 errors. And they're not true 40 errors. It's something with the electronic communication or something, and I just hope that gets worked out.
No, I hear you.
Just wanted to.
No, I hear you, and I understand.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins, just one more comment, and this is just from the perspective, we're all in agreement about literacy, and we need to do things differently. Obviously, only 38% of the students that take the LEAP test in 3rd grade are considered proficient according to that assessment. This policy, as it's written, if we look at the screener data and all the way through 4th grade, even if we assume 50% of the students in those grades are reading on grade level. I've heard, Dr. Romney, I've heard you say there's about 750,000 students enrolled in schools, I believe. So that's about 57,700 students per grade level. So these 5 grade levels at that, you're talking about just under 300,000 students. And if half of those are not reading on grade level, we do have a lot of ESSER funding, but all of those now required to go to summer programming, and if they don't pass the grade level, there's going to be some other, I guess, intended consequences in this case, because the policy is that they would be retained. So just for the sake of the principals in the room, superintendents in the room, if this were to pass as written, staffing implications moving forward for your kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade are going to be, in the spring, when we're going through staffing with our schools, that's going to be something. So just want to make that point.
Any other comments?
If I may, I just want to say again that I think it's important that we have language around the professional discretion of school building level committees as it relates to students who need to be retained and students who can move on with the expectation of interventions in that fourth grade year early on. To Dr. Gray's point, just requiring 30 hours of seat time it's not a guarantee to fix the concern. So I strongly suggest that it be considered to give some professional discretion to school building level teams on each campus. Thank you.
Mrs. Dr. Joseph?
I do have a question about the no more than 5 students. So if we're supposed to do this 30 hours within the summer months, with a limited number of teachers, with the number of students that we are, trying to target, does it have to be no more than 5 students at a time?
Do you have a different recommendation, or are you saying just to be agnostic on that piece, or do you have a different ratio recommendation?
Well, I think that it should be based on data, right? The total number of kids that we would have to service over that length of time, and at least look at the lowest possible group of kids based on the number of teachers we have, and based upon just the number of kids that need to be serviced. I think you kind of create a situation where you say no more than 5 kids, when you don't even know how many kids need to be serviced, and you don't know how many teachers you'll have to be able to service those kids.
I'll just add, Dr. Joseph, that those numbers in this policy, the 5 students to 30 hours, are not arbitrary numbers. Those were decided based on research, and research for high dosage, high impact tutoring is that you have the largest effect size when that number doesn't go past 5 students. As you have more students in a group, that effect size lowers.
I completely understand that, and everything should be rooted in research. However, the reality will give you something different.
Mr. Kennedy?
That was my concern as well, was the number of students, having a little bit of relief there to be more than 5, whether it be 8 or 10. And I do agree that 5, obviously, I'm trying to, what Clay said, looking at my elementary teachers, number of elementary teachers that I have. I mean, bottom line, I need to get my kids to grade level before the summer. And I think all of us are working to do it through different things. And, but I think the 5 would cause me the same problem with having teachers available with only 5 kids apiece. I don't think it should be an open number where you can put 30 in there. But that was my saying.
Will we have a motion, or will we receive? We have a motion to receive in a second, or do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a substitute motion. I make a substitute motion recommending adding language revision bulletin 1566 to change from requiring retention of students who do not receive minimum 30 hours to allow school-based level teams to determine whether to retain or continue the 30 hours of remediation within the first quarter of the school year. So that way the SBLC team would decide whether to retain and or to continue a multi-tiered system of support for that student within the first quarter. As aligned to current BSC policy, which is to leave the retention decisions at the system level.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Jenkins, can I make a substitute to that substitute?
Yes, sir.
I think that if we're gonna do that, then we also need to consider the point that Dr. Williams and I were trying to make around special education language. And the current language only states that students who participate in alternate assessment. Can we change that language to include all students with an individualized education plan? The IEP team can make that decision.
So just for clarity, we're adding two.
If that's acceptable, I would like to add to the motion that Mr. Ortling made. Dr. Ortling, sorry.
Make a one motion.
Yes, sir, if we can do that.
Any other additions
Any
to
other
that? I've heard
additions?
lots of
I have a
things.
question.
Yeah.
Do we need to include anything in our substitute motion about the staffing side of this? So, we want to cover everything that we've done here. We recognize that, you know, the 5-to-1, we all agree. I mean, maybe 3-to-1, I don't know. But realistically, we've got to figure out how we do this, and we don't want to jam ourselves up in policy that we don't have the resources to do.
I agree. I would agree that the 5 students, perhaps language around to the greatest extent possible situation that we've heard before. But I just don't think that's realistic because I know the struggles we've had staffing summer school in the last couple of years, and I don't think that's going to be realistic.
I think we're all going to do this certainly to the greatest extent possible, and maybe that's the language we go after. We need to consider available resources. The trained staff piece there has come up that we're not, you know, there could be places where we're still on the road to that. So we just need to think about the staffing and the ratio side of this. Sorry, I don't have the wordsmithing abilities to do that. Some people do.
And can we also add the flexibility to the 30 hours when it can take place?
So Ms. Davis, can you
Wait a minute.
give me some?
I didn't get the teacher piece, though. I was trying to.
While Shannon is working on that novel over there, this will run the risk of creating more conversation, and I don't want it to be said that Clay is in support of retention across the board, but I will say this past year we experienced a record number of retentions in our district. We also likewise have a record number of parental involvement. Not all of that parental involvement positive, obviously, but nevertheless, we have created much more dialogue and an awareness of the severity if we keep moving kids forward without having them achieve on grade level status, and we're doing a disservice. So just in light of the whole retention discussion, that's one thing that we've learned in our time over the last few months. Try to help you out, Shane.
We're almost there.
No more.
And while we're waiting, I think we just want to be sure that there are no unintended consequences with this. I think we all can, well, hopefully we all can agree that providing these policies and things in place will help children be successful. We just want to ensure that there are no unintended consequences. So Ms. Davis is going to try to encapsulate what we're saying.
Does she need more time?
It may not be pretty, but
Some
I
extended
can,
time.
yeah, I can.
So Dr. Chesson, while she's
Yes.
finished composing that, so if I remember correctly, really when we're talking about tier 3 students, those who are in most need, the group size actually should be less than 5 and really should be 3 or less. Is that still accurate research?
That is still accurate. The research that I'm talking about specifically is around high dosage tutoring, where we see that 5 amount is really the number. I've seen some research 5 to 6 students, and when we see tutoring group sizes over 6, and we see that lessens effect size overall. And that's some more recent high dosage tutoring research during the pandemic and then post-pandemic.
Thank you.
So I think providing that flexibility for the 30 hours would help us get down to that, that number that research is stating. But did anybody address, I'm thinking about what Dr. Gray said about, just giving the kids just the 30 hours. And that would, if they don't attend, then you retain them. But then how do we know that what we've given them has been effective if we don't assess them in the end?
Well, there's nothing that prevents a system from doing that. I mean, if I were leading this system and I knew I had to do this, I would, whenever the child came in, I would probably do a pre and post when they were there. We're happy to write that into the guidance that we build on the back end of this to be helpful. But I would think most everyone would do that anyway, but we will build it into the guidance.
Yes.
Can I be a filler also? Since everybody's filling in time for
You're just taking up your accountability.
I agree, but at the same time, too, we need to make sure it'll be better if we can all use a very similar assessment. That way, when we get that data, we can actually show as a state whether or not we're seeing the improvements that we're looking for.
Maybe we could actually pilot the system that the state is currently in the RFP for, that we will all use in the fall, during the summer.
That would be ideal.
So we're gonna give it a shot here.
Okay. I'm going to be able to capture, go back and listen to the tape to capture the exact wording that Dr. Ortman used, but I'll summarize it. You received the report with the following recommendation. Instead of requiring retention, allow SBLC to determine remediation during the first quarter and whether or not retention, summer school is necessary.
To retain, the SBLC team to retain, or to determine whether or not 30 hours of remediation could be held within the first quarter.
Okay, I can go back and get that for sure. Where it says alternate assessments regarding students with disabilities, to change that to all students with an IEP. Adding language regarding the student-to-teacher ratio to say to the greatest extent possible, it would be the 5-to-1 ratio. To provide flexibility of when the 30 hours of remediation will occur, and to have flexibility around the required literacy skills training for teachers, given the timeline and the number of vacancies that are in the state. Is there anything else?
So we have a motion. We do not have
No,
a.
that's just the wording.
Yes.
You guys should have.
I'll keep my second.
And we have a second. All right. Those in favor? Those in favor? Say again. Yes, we're ready for a vote. So we have a motion and a
Are there
second.
any other comments?
Are there any other comments?
I have a
Other
comment.
comments?
I do have a comment. This, so thinking that maybe the best thing to do, because it's just so much, is to just pull the thing, work on it, and then bring it back to SAC. I don't know, I mean, like, we're sitting here trying to revise a whole policy, and when I think that we maybe, so I'm gonna make a substitute motion, or that we.
I can withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Someone else is willing to make a motion.
Yes.
But I guess the only comment or question would be whether or not this would still proceed as is.
No.
It's still proceeding.
Yeah, let me give you context. So this was actually presented in August, even though to Bessie, the retention piece was not in there. They referred it to SAC and retained it on the agenda for October. So it is going to be on the agenda, and I'm thinking you may want to get your points in now.
That and also the timeline. So if we're going to need to inform parents and teachers and principals, we need to start doing that sooner rather than later.
That puts us in an awkward position, because now we have to sit here and include the things that we feel need to be included, and we may not put everything in, or, we may not be thinking of every single thing. I think there needs to be some, I don't know, a sideline conversation or something about this to make sure that what we're.
You could recommend that the board defer this till December with the following recommendations, and have it come back to the November SAC for clarification.
That's it, right, that's it, that's my motion.
Okay.
So I officially withdraw my motion.
Can't really do that.
Okay.
You reckon, got it. And who's the second?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second by David. All right, do we have any additional comment or public comment? Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Marks.
Yeah, so just wanted to share, I really appreciate the robust discussion on this one. I had a couple of comments. The first one was, I appreciate, I guess, the initial flexibility that was considered with the 30 hours. But I'm curious, Dr. Jason, with regard to best practice, if I think of a student in that K through 4 grades, it's hard for me to think of a child that young, 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, and get my 30 hours in, you're going to keep their attention for that long. What is the best practice for that 30 hours with regard to those focused approaches?
Yeah, I don't think the schedule that you just named is the intent of the policy at all. The intent is for it to occur, and I think every educator in the room can agree, no kindergarten through 4th grade student will sit that long. And so it was to occur in smaller bits of time. The whole idea is that it's within a summer program. And so our school systems have stood up these amazing summer programs. And so that intensive intervention would take place within that time. And so they have a summer camp type schedule, or maybe they're getting some math learning as well, and some hands-on STEM activities and some outside playtime. And that maybe there are 3 20-minute sessions throughout the day.
So that's what I was trying to get to, right? What the best practice was for implementation, and you scope that out for me. So that's what I was looking for.
And that information, Mr. Morris, is also available in the summer guidance that we've previously provided the systems.
Okay. Next question I had was, can you refresh my memory? How long does it take to train the teacher to conduct that literacy program?
So that depends on 2 factors, and it's up to the school system leadership to determine the pacing, so how long they want to allow the teachers to take it, the program, and which program they choose of those available and have been deemed high quality on our vendor guide. And so it is a large amount of hours, and so some school systems, yes, will take up to 2 years to train a single teacher depending on what program and how that pacing works.
So that's what I'm trying to get to. If there's a concern for shortage of these qualified teachers, then even if I started today, right, and I recognize I have a shortage of X, then how long would it take me to fill that gap? That's what I'm trying to get a sense for.
I think the concern, I would assume, is that our school systems already have their plans in place. And some of those plans for teachers completing their training may go past maybe even half of their teachers. Some of them are training them in cohorts of teachers, and some are going first, and then some starting a few months behind.
Right. So this is a new card in the deck, right? So I had to adjust my plan. So I'm trying to get a feel for what will be involved, with that. If I'm 2 teachers short, how big of a commitment, a time commitment is that? That's what I was trying to get a feel for. So, okay, last comment I had was just one of the things you did, Brown, for the reference to the surveys. I requested the survey last year, I requested the survey this year, so that we could all get a sense, a quantifiable sense of what the teacher shortage looks like in our state, where those shortages are, so that Bessie could have that data to process it, as well as the state legislators. And so with that data in hand, then they can have a solid basis, right, to take consideration going forward to address that gap, whether it be financial incentives or other law or policy adjustments. So I really appreciate Superintendent Brown's comments about the 70% response. I don't fully understand the gap that you expressed with regard to the electronic means of communication. But I'd really like to learn more about that, and what we can do to have more accurate, timely, and efficient transfer of data from the districts to the State Department of Education. Because like Dr. Bromley said, we're trying to help everybody in this room. And if we get that data in hand, and Bessie can process it, we can work with legislators, right, to use that data for everybody's good. So whatever we can do to help with that, I'd certainly like to get involved with that, so thank you.
Until the systems communicate, we're submitting them on time. There's some issues coming back. So you're spending extra time and hours, and people that don't understand, that are learning the system down here while we're submitting it. So I think it's the merger of the systems, is that what you told me a while back? It's not reading right. So we're submitting stuff, but it's kicking it back in more errors than what were originally done. So I think until they get the kinks out, it's a technology issue that we're trying to work with.
Appreciate that feedback.
Dr. Bromley, the pupil progression plans that we just passed for this year that have in it the promotion requirements for kids going in, if Bessie puts this in place, what's that do to our pupil progression that we've all just adopted that have a promotion requirements already in it? This basically would change it. Of course, after all this discussion, if the legislature passes this next year, it's our hands anyway. But if this goes through Bessie right now, what's that do to our pupil progression plans we just passed?
Well, pupil progression would have to reflect the policy.
It would just supersede it.
So we have a motion by Dr. Joseph and a second by Mr. Alexander. Those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Jenkins, this will take a motion, but I would recommend that we go ahead and take 3.6 out of order.
Yes.
Yes, I got
We're going to do the same thing. Thank you. I appreciate it. Considering Dr. Brown's schedule, I'd like to ask the council that we to make a motion to
take item 3.6 out of order.
take item 3.6 out of order. I will take 3.6 out of order. A motion by Mr. Dillier.
Second.
A second by Dr. Gray. Those in favor? Any opposed? Item 3.6, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, Louisiana School District and State Accountability Systems regarding accountability. Dr. Brown?
Receive.
Motion to receive. So moved. Motion by Mr. Dillier and second by Mr. Jones. Motion by Mr. Jones and second by Mr. Dillier. All right. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, Mr. Jenkins, we certainly had a brief presentation prepared, but I think in conversations with some members of the Superintendents Association, you all have something that you would like to share with us. And so in the sake of time, we will just defer on our presentation and provide it for you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Patrick, may I submit a proposal, please?
Yes.
Can I take those and pass those out? While they're passing out this proposal, there's just a few things I'd like to make comments before we get to this. As we get to it, it is a very simple blueprint proposal from last. It's very equitable for all. It is in a perfect timing. It can go in place with K through 2 that I believe y'all are working on. There's also plenty of time for everybody to come to the table to work on this. I have a few things I'd like to comment. The media make some comments to us that the superintendents want everything watered down or we're worried about certain things, when every superintendent that I know is for accountability, wants what's right for kids. We want this fair, consistent, and equitable for all. So kind of worked on a proposal. After I go through the proposal, I'd love some comment. I would hope that we have more stakeholders want to sit at the table with us. Nobody has sat with us yet, offered to sit with us until this meeting. So I'm going to start. The first page is just talking about considerations, outcomes, the state role, the district roles, kind of like a preference. You'll turn to the second page, the elementary accountability proposal. Elementary's to my heart. I don't see how we can assess a LEAP assessment that's not properly on grade level. We get the information back too late to use it. I think the most reliable way to do anything, and I think Dr. Bromley said it a few minutes ago, is a pre and post test. He mentioned that during the conversation. I think if you do a pre and a post test, you do interims during the middle of the year, teachers can make adjustments. You can get your growth piece from ESSA on the elementary accountability test. I don't like the Mastery Advanced. Parents do not understand this. Half our teachers do not understand this. This whole system should be made for parents to understand, educators to understand this. And to me, I came in years ago when we talked about above grade level, below grade level, on grade level, not Mastery Advanced. So that can be adjusted. I'm also asking this to be on a 100-point scale. You start getting to 125, you're breaking, we get into the weeds with everything we do with the accountability system instead of making it simple. I think you have options with your pre and post. We can either do a vertical alignment, which is what I'm for. I think that if you go through a vertical alignment, you can start with your K through 2 piece. It can run all the way up to the ACT, which I'm not sure is our standard goal here. When you're listening to the Board of Regents, you can take dual enrollment classes and still get into college without the ACT. You can make a 17 on the ACT, get a text top award, but you're granted a 0 on our current accountability system. You also, we don't acknowledge anything about the military. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit to say, I don't have a clue where we're going with ACT and nobody else does. NC2A is also saying they have suspended the ACT for athletes to get into college in January. They're going to acknowledge if they're going to do away with it or not. So if we can start with the K through 2 piece, which I am very excited about. I've been pushing for that for 6 years now. And vertically align everything through K through 8 to our high schools to whatever that system may be. Right now it's the ACT. I think things are fair and consistent. Or we can continue align to the LEAP, which as we know, again, the LEAP is not on grade level, it's above. I think if you go through a testing system, you can still break down scale scores. This is still open for conversation. That, let's just say a child, right now we give a child 0 points that may have grown a year or a year and a half, but didn't make it to grade level. That teacher busted their tail, that child busted their tail, and we're telling them they're a failure. They made growth. So in that portion, I'm just throwing this out there, you can get a half a year to 3/4 year of growth, and you should be able to get an approaching basic and at least a D on the scale for that. If you get a 1 year basic growth or on grade level, that's our goal, is to have kids on grade level. That would be a basic score or on grade level. Mastery or attain the grade level knowledge. If they have mastered that, if it's a certain scale score on whatever test we use, then that can show the mastery that we're shooting for, that everybody's shooting for. And then advanced is anything that exceeds that. Also an extra one we could add to this that I just highlighted at the bottom is we can look back at the attendance. We keep talking about attendance. And ESSA allows an attendance portion of this that we could add. So any questions on the elementary proposal at all right now? And like I said, it's just a blueprint. Right now, I think with our accountability system, all the changes and tweaks that are going, we're still building the plane while we're flying. That's not the way to do this. I think we should build the foundation of the home and build it solid for years to come for my grandkids that are in school right now. But I want the best for them. Any questions, Dr. Bowman, on that part? If you'll flip over to the last high school accountability proposal, ESSA requirements say we have to have certain percentages. Broke these down. Instead of saying strength of diplomas to college and career readiness, we give that 25%. The cohort graduation rate, 25%. ACT work keys, with asking Bessie to take out, everyone takes the ACT, because not all of our kids are going to go to college. I live in a rural community. I have different groups We make them take the ACT, they make a 9 on it, or they don't try, and then people get punished for that. Those that are going to go in the TOPS track are going to take the ACT, do the best they can. Those that are going on the work track or some of our different pathways, the work keys work best for them. I think we could look at that. So, and then a pre and post on our assessment growth, and includes regular ed 504 students, EL students. We need a system that does not discriminate against our special ed or our low socioeconomic. Again, it needs to be fair and equitable for all. Rural communities we have in North Louisiana have no mills, have no plants, can't get colleges to help them do dual enrollment. They're lucky with ESSERs that they can at least get some stuff done they don't have the funding for. That's not equitable. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Y'all know this. I'm asking us to do something about it. We're in the time to make change. And then the last portion that I was talking about, you've got your school attendance rate. You can add 5%, or you can look at chronic absenteeism. Pre and post is a 25%. You can do scale points. As I said, the range would need to be determined by the stakeholders, which everybody needs to be at the table, our teachers. I have not heard one person sit with a teacher group and ask about the full accountability system. You look out, K through 2 is being talked about. You look out, other things are being talked about. How many of y'all can tell me somebody has sat with your teachers and asked? I have. I presented this to my principals. They presented it to the teachers. The teachers want something that's equitable and fair and don't care about the grades. If we're doing right by kids, let the grades fall as they should. As a kid, it's like pickup sticks. They hit the ground, you pick them up and play the best you can. We ask, and I'm not the best presenter, I'm sorry, I'm preaching, I'm just very emotional about this. We ask a lot of our kids and our teachers, we need to listen to them. And that's my proposal. I know that we have 20-something superintendents here. Dr. Bromley, State Department, even provided a colorful sheet, just to make it look a little better, but I'm more black and white on paper. But my accountability person said this looks better. So if there's any questions, please ask me. I am not the guru, but I think the basics, a parent can understand averaging these, just like we average grades for kids, and turn around and present this the right way. And ask Betsy to work with us too.
Do we have any comments? Comments? Ms. Lambert, Dr. Bromley, or any other comment? Any comments?
I'd like to make a comment.
I'm sorry.
I'd just like to thank you so very much for all of the work that you did in putting this together and including us all in the discussion. I think it is very important that stakeholders are involved in this process and that decisions aren't made with just a few people and then shared. We do have the Accountability Council. We do have this Superintendent's Advisory Council. It was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those committees were developed to endorse or make recommendations to Bessie. But it is my feeling that based on the last meeting that we had at the Accountability Council, there were items that were discussed that were in Bulletin 111 already and not brought before us for recommendation, discussion, or anything. For example, the 9th grade success piece that would be worth 5% of a school performance score. That item was also included in Bulletin 111 last month for Bessie to approve. So if Bessie would have approved Bulletin 111 last month, then I'm questioning what kind of conversation we would have had at the Accountability Council, knowing that that item was already approved. In addition, since it was tabled, and we do thank Bessie for tabling it and giving us the opportunity to have the discussions before October about, what would be fair and equitable for all kids. It's just the idea of having all stakeholders involved, right? We do have opposing views. We all think differently about what should happen for our kids. but none of us have ever come to the table together to discuss any of it. And so rather than try to pit one group against the other, it's time that we all come together and do what's right for kids. We're all on the same team. If we truly care about kids, then we will all come together as one and develop a good, fair, equitable plan for them. And not be exclusive, be inclusive. I think about my school system and I will fight for my kids every single day. And they deserve to be included in this accountability system. This accountability system, as is in this Bulletin 111, is not for my school system. We will never be able to have IB or any of the other things that's listed in here. We are happy and fortunate that we do have the means to provide dual enrollment. But it's limited because of the limited resources. So you cannot beat people over the head because they're poor. Do not punish people because they're poor, right? You give them the opportunities to be successful. We need access and opportunity. And I think this is a great time for all stakeholders involved to come together finally, because we never have, to really have a good plan for kids.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment. I skipped a few things. The high school area, the college and career, I'd like to note a few other things that I left off. Right now, if a child takes a high set, or we have a fifth-year graduate, they get nothing. We get nothing. That would be included the D. A simple D. A regional credential. We have districts, and I was able to use this name, such as Tensall Parish. All they can do is give a regional accreditation, nothing else. That's not built in here. Military, we have nothing to these kids that take a test and go into the military. That needs to be included. The different basic credentials, the pre-apprentice, we want these in there. And people keep saying we don't. If you have a question, ask your superintendent. We're a group that work hard every day. As soon as we get out of here, our phones are going off. There's something going on back at our district that we have to deal with. It may be dealing with law enforcement, it may be dealing with a parent. But we're down here, want to be heard, want to be included, and not bashed over the job we do. I'm probably the worst of the superintendents to be in here presenting this. There are so many in here smarter than me. But the basics is, it's about the kids. And then supporting our teachers. And Dr. Bromley, I'm not throwing you under the bus right now at all. You may take it that way. But I saw you on LPB, and the first thing you said was, they were talking about teacher retention. And you're trying to figure out ways how we keep teachers. Well, quit doing this to them. Sit there and listen to them. Let's find something simple, and then go listen to them about this. I know I've invited you to our district before. You've not made it to my district yet. Your invitation is still there. Don't need the media, just you come and listen and sit. And I think that right there will make a lot of difference. Because I'm not the expert in it. That's my piece, I'm sorry.
Mr. Jenkins? Yes, I just want to first of all thank Mr. Claxton for all the hard work. We've been on multiple calls over the last few weeks. And I want to reiterate the point too, that over the last few weeks, we've heard and read the media present other sides to the accountability argument with very few comments relative specific to asking the superintendents how they feel, despite the fact that over a month ago, Louisiana Association of School Superintendents put out a position statement that wholeheartedly agreed that the accountability system needed to be addressed, and gave some suggestions for compromise, even using the current Bessie proposal as a starting point. As Mr. Claxton has said, we've been for accountability. In fact, one could argue that 10 or 12 years ago, when the state had to adopt an accountability proposal, everybody came to the table to develop a system that not only met the requirements of ESSA, but also addressed one of the biggest needs in the state of Louisiana at the time, when the state graduation rate was in the 60% range. And so the state, through the Accountability Commission and stakeholders, we
created a system to address those needs. And the improvement in graduation rate over the last 10 years means literally tens of thousands more students are graduating from high schools today than were under the old system. But rather than celebrate the success of school building leaders, parents, students, systems, we've criticized it on a system that we didn't create, a system that was adopted, and our school systems have figured out ways to be successful. As Mr. Claxton said, we all agree that there needs to be, our success criteria, our priorities are changing. We recognize that. But it's going to take educated people who love children to sit down and talk about, okay, what are the new success criteria for the state of Louisiana? Since we've achieved this, we've proven that we can work successfully together already. I believe Mr. Claxton's presentation is one that if you read the law about the collaboration that's supposed to be had in the development of a formula, it specifically states one that parents can understand. Mr. Claxton's put something together that I think many can understand. But even if we want to look at the Bessie Work Group proposal with this one side by side, let's collaborate, as the law says, on the development of, as the law says, an accountability formula that people can understand. So again, I want to thank Mr. Claxton. I want to thank all the superintendents who have been active participants in this, despite the negative rhetoric out there that's come against superintendents. So I believe it's time that we can all come together. We don't have to rush into anything. I think it took 2.5 years for the previous formula to come up with, and then it's been tweaked even along the way a little bit. So we've proven that we can do it. Let's just stay in that mindset and that mode, because we all love the children of the state. We love our state. We want to see our state make progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pop. Mr. Alexander.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly just thank Superintendent Claxton and all the other superintendents that participated. I know we've all had some level of input in this, and certainly this reflects a lot of the input we've been saying along the way. I really appreciate the details that go into this. It's the work of schools. We said a long, long time ago, this is not an easy thing to do, and so measuring the work of schools is hard. But we got to get it right. And if we don't get it right, we are on either end. If we're inflating it, that's wrong to the public. And if it's overly, if it's overkill, that's wrong to the public too. I really appreciate Superintendent Claxton's comment around our teachers. Whether we want to realize it or not, when the accountability system is perceived as being unfair to children, and measurements are being unfair to schools, it creates a morale problem. And the most significant thing that we are trying to support here, which is what's going on in classrooms and having quality people there, knowing that their work can be recognized. I mean, doesn't everybody want that to happen? What I like about what's being proposed here, and I think I want to reiterate your initial words there, this is kind of like a work in progress, certainly a strong framework we can use, perhaps still needs some input in it, but it recognizes the work of children along the way and progress that's being made. Think about how many places we say, well, we're really glad you moved from UNSAT to approaching basic, but that's not worth anything to you or your school at this point in time. And certainly we're moving into a direction where we're saying, look, you can graduate from high school and I don't, but there's a section of our accountability system where you both get the same 0. So those are things that we have said along the way that we need to recognize the work of schools. And honestly, that's the last thing I'll say, the work of schools is over 13 or 14 years, depending on whether you start in Head Start, pre-K4, or kindergarten, maybe even 15 years. It's the body of work of the local education authority and the school systems that we're really trying to get right here. And communities they deserve to understand how their schools are progressing accurately. I think this reflects a lot of that, and it's simple. Again, I just thank you guys for all of you, men and women that put this together, so that we can have something to lay side by side, as Superintendent Powell said, with what's being considered from the LWB. Thank you.
Great. Yes, just a quick comment. First, thank you, David, for taking the time to put this document together. I haven't had a chance to see this prior to today, but just glancing at it, it looks like it's a more equitable opportunity for our systems. I don't pay as much attention to some of the outside noise, so I know that there has been some rhetoric about superintendents and what their issues are in terms of what our position is in relationship to the current proposal that is out there. And I don't think that that has much merit to it. I just think that whatever we decide to do is just like the whole 30-hour piece. What's the intent of doing it? If we get into this particular position and we say that the current one that we have is not accurate or not giving us balance, or the fact that high schools are scoring higher in relationship to elementary schools, and then we do a complete oversteer, overcorrection, we can actually create another situation that we're trying to improve on this particular piece. But then we take our time with this, look at it, and try to figure out what's going to provide equity amongst all of our districts across, because we all don't have the same resources. What we have in Jefferson, I can promise you, David does not have in his particular area. So I really think that just having opportunities for us to have some more conversations, I'm not trying to kick the can down the road. If we can find something that can happen sooner rather than later, I think we'll all be for it, but it has to be the right one. Just jumping into something just to say we're doing it, it looks good in certain circles, but will we really get the long-term effect that we're looking for? You can't just keep adjusting every time it does not work the way that we want to. We have to start thinking long-term in relationship to how we build this out, so as we don't have to switch every 2 or 3 years.
Mr. Gray, I appreciate it. That's what I've been trying to do. I presented this in 2016 when I came as superintendent with John White. John White read the first page, threw it away, and told me he didn't read it. Made a few adjustments. I sent it on as the years have come along, and people don't listen. And you're looking at this being back. I'm an old special ed teacher. And I tell this to everybody, when the Brigance was what we used to pre and post, and then we go through following the student's IEP, we were giving progress reports to parents every 6 or 9 weeks. We knew where the kids were. So my belief in the pre and post, this is valid and allowable. I was forced into doing League 360, so I still have 360. Some districts may not. And Dr. Bromley can tell us, I don't know if we're about to make an agreement, or if DRC is about to renew. Are we close to that?
It's a few years out.
So, and I'm not asking this to be now. I'm asking this to be in a couple of years, for us to work on this so in the future it is ready. And if you're in the process of figure out, this is a good time, K through 2, elementary, through high school, we can find the right system that's valid and reliable. It's not just fly by the night. So you're correct. Not throwing this down, but I've been working on this for years. And every time something changes. Bessie changes. The ESSA has come into play. And I have a form. I'm trying to make sure this fits into ESSA. Because as we know, what ESSA requires and what the state of Louisiana has adopted, the state of Louisiana has made it far harder than what ESSA says. We're testing more than what ESSA says. It can be simple and still accountable and understandable by parents and teachers. So, thank you, Dr. Roby.
Hey, guys, I just want to echo what many other superintendents have said. First of all, thanks, Mr. Claxton, for putting this together, because in attending quite a few meetings that many of us have attended over the last 6 or 7 months since the original proposal, as it is stated now currently to the Bessie work group, that has not seen hardly any changes to that original proposal from 7 months ago to where it is today. I can honestly say, based on all those meetings I've attended and or listened to, this proposal is more inclusive of the feedback that has been provided relative to the current proposal. It's more equitable in nature. It's easy to understand, which is one of the primary priorities of the Bessie work group. I believe in Mr. Lambert, when he presented those things, that it's easy for parents and stakeholders to understand. It reflects college and career readiness more equitably than what the current recommendation does. And from listening to the Accountability Commission meeting, I think it was last week, when you heard the concerns from those members of that committee, including the Board of Regents, relative to AP and dual enrollment credits, and it still maintains a higher level of rigor than what potentially our current system does, but it's more equitable in nature. So not only is easy to understand, it includes feedback, that was given at specific meetings. But it also modifies it in such a way that it does add more value and rigor to academic standards, to college and career readiness, gives value to our military service members. That alone, to me, obviously struck a chord with me and many others. And growth across all grade levels, true growth. And then finally, while it may not be flawless, is anything flawless in life? But I think it truly does represent some level of collaboration and feedback that was heard. We often tell our teachers to teach from a level of belonging and dignity. And we teach our teachers, right, to build that climate in the classroom, and a culture in the classroom to make your students feel as though they belong. And I feel as a superintendent, many superintendents feel the same way. We don't feel like we belonged as part of this discussion when we've been part of it. We don't feel like we truly belonged. We can't go back and change what's occurred to this point, right? We can't go back and change all of those things, but we can. Like Dr. Joseph said, we can start today to create a new ending. And I think we all want to just come together and collaborate. We truly do. So I hope that the proposal that Mr. Claxton has proposed is taken seriously. I do want to acknowledge, we invited Mr. Morris to our school system to actually witness college and career readiness at our satellite center. And I want to thank Mr. Morris, publicly for truly not entertaining, but truly listening and being a part of the discussion relative to college and career readiness. And that's for St. Charles Parish Public Schools in our community. But we recognize it's not equitable according to other communities across the state. But our accountability formula and our accountability system must be. So I just, again, want to thank Mr. Claxton, and I hope the department considers this proposal.
Yes, Dr. President.
Just to kind of add to this particular piece, especially when you start talking about the ACT, I'm on the future assessments team, and we have a few of us that are on there. And one of the things that we're having conversations about is possibly what would it look like if we got rid of Leap 2025 for our high school kids and did more of an ACT aligned, since that becomes the end point of what we're trying to do anyway. It will still keep us in compliance and give us something that our kids can actually be successful on throughout, because the coursework that they take for Leap 2025 may not necessarily align to what they're going to see on the ACT. And then by the time they get to ACT, they don't have the coursework for them to be successful on the ACT, especially if we're going to keep ACT as something that everybody has to take. I hope that they listen to that recommendation. And then also, too, another piece is for our elementary kids, and the testing is trying to do something where we have shorter assessments. Instead of having an autopsy at the end of the school year that the kids have learned something in the fall semester and then they have to get to the end and try to recall what they learned in the beginning, even though we should be chunking that stuff throughout the entire year. But it would be better if we had shorter assessments. So instead of doing our benchmark testing throughout the year, let that be the assessment that actually counts in some form or fashion to what the end outcome is going to be. That way we're actually getting an accurate measure of what the kids are learning in relationship to that subject matter during that time frame. So I think all those things are happening right now, which actually should be playing a part in where we go in terms of our overall accountability. And I just want to put that out there.
So I'm going to take the liberty to say something. And again, I know time is critically important. But one of our superintendents always says, words matter. And so it's critically important that, we hear each other. And so I know that after this meeting, there's going to be social media is going to go crazy. The media is going to have their spin on things, etc. But what I'd like to propose to everyone, to have an opportunity to be able to have a seat at the table. I mean, we have the Principals Association, we have the SPED Association, we have the Superintendent Association, we have LSBA, we have Louisiana Federation of Teachers, Louisiana Association of Educators, Pelican Institute, a lot of the BESID board members that are involved in the creation of the plan, Charter School Association, etc. It would be an awesome opportunity for all of those representatives to sit in the room and have a conversation. Because we're going to have something, we're going to have positions that we're going to either agree or disagree with, and that's okay. That's a good thing, to be able to have those dialogue. But rather than communicating those things via other means of communication, rather than face-to-face, doesn't get anything solved. But I think if we can put everybody together and start understanding what those positions are, I believe we're gonna have more things in common than not. And so if we have that opportunity to be able to sit together and look at all of those positions, we can probably create something that we all can agree on in majority. We may not ever agree on everything, but the majority of the best plan that we can present forward. So I'd just like to have that opportunity for where we can all sit together for whatever amount of time it takes, where we have an opportunity to communicate with each other. And so those things are critically important. David said that, he's an old sped teacher. I served a long time in the military. And so, we can create plans, but we always have to have alternatives to those plans. Because when the bullets start flying, you need to be able to adjust. You need to lift and shift. And so that's what we're asking right now, to have that opportunity to lift and shift, to re-engage all parties so that we can develop something that's going to be lasting years and years for the children of Louisiana. Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Jenkins, that the Superintendent Advisory Committee recommend that this proposal be presented alongside the Bessie Work Group proposal at the upcoming Bessie meeting. Since there is, as I understand, a motion for the October 11th Bessie meeting to hear or receive from administration recommendations relative to accountability. But if I remember, the last Bessie meeting, what was adopted was that we adopted the K-2 piece with the recommendation of the administration to receive more feedback, give the administration time to receive more feedback from superintendents and other stakeholders, and then at the earliest, back to the October 11th Bessie meeting. I think that was the word. And so my assumption is that it will be at the October 11th meeting that this will be back on the agenda. So my proposal would be that at the very least, this proposal be allowed to be presented in addition to the Bessie Work Group. And Ms. Davis, I don't know if that's allowable. I don't know what, from SAC, what is exactly, how that impacts a Bessie agenda.
We have a motion of Mr. Palmer.
I'm just thinking about it, because the item will be brought, itself will be a department recommendation. It's unusual to have a group's proposal within that item, but one thing we could do is note in these minutes that a proposal was presented and attach it to the minutes.
At least to the back, and so that would be in the backup for the agenda for the Bessie meeting?
It would be in the SAC report item.
Ms. Davis, could we make a recommendation that Bessie add another agenda item specifically referencing this proposal? Is that more feasible than just noting?
What we could do is just, when the SAC, do what I just said, and when the SAC item comes up, we won't have it, normally we consent those reports. It would not be consent, and then at that time, someone from SAC could come up and present under that item. Now, you wouldn't get unlimited time, but you'd get 5 minutes, or whatever the board would allow.
So a little more direct question, similar to what Dr. Odom's asking. Is there a process where the public can add an item to the Bessie?
The only way is the department, the board office president, or a board member at the meeting, or within the time frame, the board member can request an item on its own, on their own.
I think Mr. Claxton did it in under 5 minutes. I think we're okay.
Yeah, I think that would be the best avenue.
So I'd like to ask, you said it's unusual for an item to be added. Is that
For back, I mean,
unusual?
it would be unusual.
Okay, but can it be done? Is it?
I mean, I don't think that, it's a department's item. I don't think they want to bring stakeholder groups' feedback under their item for bulletin revision. That will be the title of the item.
But it doesn't stop us from recommending it to Bessie. As this committee, we still could do it. It's how you present it before the record. We could go with this motion that it goes to Bessie. and then if it's denied, it's denied, correct?
You could,
Because somebody's going to deny putting it on the agenda if we recommend it to go to Bessie for a meeting, correct?
oh, well, there's not gonna be, they're gonna get your feedback at the meeting, so if it's in the minutes to recommend an item, the meeting's already happening.
I
So,
think the easiest route, if we have one Bessie member to submit it as a recommended agenda item, is that the
I really think if you just put it under the receipt of the minutes, you can go through your proposal.
I think that's what, so we need to know for certain that if we go that route, somebody's gonna be afforded at least the 5 minutes
Oh, yeah,
to be able
sure.
to present. Okay.
It won't, we will not put it on consent. They'll receive the minutes, the proposal will be in the backup as noted in the motion that y'all are making today, and they can come, whoever can come up and.
So that's what I want this motion to be conclusive of, that at Bessie, a member of the Superintendent Advisory Committee is afforded the opportunity to present the alternative proposal to the Bessie Work Group's proposal.
And I would request too, with a little bit of latitude and time, I don't know how you could do that.
Capture that.
Yeah, so you could capture that whether we're granted it or not.
Yes,
And then, of course, the item itself would entertain public comment
yes.
as it needs to, but the presentation itself may not be justified in 5 minutes, should it need 7 minutes. I'm certainly not asking for 30, but just some latitude there.
We could, yeah, so we could, you all can receive the report, noting that you presented a proposal for Bessie's consideration, and requesting an opportunity to present the proposal at the Bessie meeting with a time limit of, with the appropriate amount of time.
That's my motion.
All right, second?
We have a second? We have a second. And do you have any public comments? Do you have any public comments?
No.
No comments heard. Do you have any comments from the council? Okay, those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Jenkins, just one comment. Mr. Claxton, thank you for taking some time to present that information. Really appreciate it. We'll review it. I didn't have the copy whenever you started, so I was trying to catch up. One thing you said is that I haven't been to Jackson. I want to apologize for not having been to Jackson. I have been to Jackson, just not to one of your schools. But I was looking around the room, there are 18 superintendents here. I've been to 11 of the 18 systems in 2 years. There are 190 plus school systems in the state of Louisiana. Last week, I taught civics in West Baton Rouge. I celebrated Blue Ribbon in Caddo. This week, I've been in Lafourche for the Celebrated Models of Excellence. I sat in the instructional leadership team meeting in the EBR. Next week, I'll be doing a faculty meeting at Bienville. Then I'm doing walkthroughs in Calcasieu, and then I'm leading a faculty meeting in Beauregard. So it's certainly a priority for me to be in schools and visit with teachers, and I do that frequently. And so you are right, I have not been in Jackson, but I have certainly visited with a share of teachers and leaders.
You've been through Jackson, though, haven't you?
I have been to Jackson.
Through Jackson.
Through and to.
Even by my school board office, said you're driving, right? Okay, just want that on the record too. That's that $99 doctor that
I have probably spent more time in Jackson than anywhere else, personally, as you know.
Well, there you go. Coffee's there.
Thank you. Item 3.5, consideration of revisions to bulletins and revisions to legislation of 2022 regular legislative session. Item A, bulletin 119, Louisiana School Transportation Specifications and Procedures.
Mr. John, if you all could promise to be nice to Mr. Warrenford, I'd like to excuse myself.
I do have a motion to receive. I have a motion to receive. I have a motion by Dr. Joseph, a second by Mr. Crowell. Ms. Melissa.
Yeah, I wish someone would ask the legislature to do that for me too, but thank y'all for being kind. So as you know, we got out of the legislative session in June. It was a very heavy session with a lot of education policy. Last month in August and October and December, we were trying to finalize all the policy changes that were necessary in response to legislation that was passed. So what you have in your packets and on this sheet is a lot. This month we are bringing the bulk of those legislative changes. So I'm not going to go down each one, but what I will say is the changes and where the changes are happening. So the first one we have is changes to Bulletin 741, subsection 2305, ancillary areas of instruction. You can see all of the acts that have constituted those changes. The next we have Bulletin 741, subsection 337, written policies and procedures with the list of acts and the changes that are coming. The next we have Bulletin 741 and the changes. There's several in here from the subsections. There's subsection 517, 2319, 901, and 915, and the acts that change those. Then you have another one where it's 741 and the different subsections in there and the acts that change in subsection 325, 3503, 3305, and 1303. With an exception for that last one, there's also changes reflected in Bulletin 126, which is our charter school law bulletin, and Bulletin 741 non-public, because that law dealt with all three of those systems. And then our final, I have two. So our second to last one is bulletin changes to Bulletin 741 and 1566 in response to Act 520 of the 2022 legislative session. So Bulletin 1566, which is specific to pupil progression policies and procedures, and then Bulletin 741 for the administrator handbook. And then the last one I have for y'all is the changes to Bulletin 119, Bulletin 130, Bulletin 1903, and Bulletin 996. And then in your packets, you'll also see the actual changes that will happen in those policies. It's a lot, so I understand if you cannot ask questions of me right now, but I am available to everyone. You should all have my contact information. If not, I know Mr. Falls can get it to you, and I'm pretty accessible through School Boards Association or also the Superintendents Advisory, our Superintendents Association. So do I have any broad overarching questions?
Any comments from the council? I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
So if you can look at the Bulletin 741, specifically regarding kindergarten and pre-kindergarten.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th sheet in the packet. So in that particular proposal that's there, it has some information regarding, and I'm assuming it comes from Senator
Senator Fields.
Fields, thank you. His changes to kindergarten in particular. However, it has a section in here that reads, child enrolled in pre-kindergarten according to the guidelines set forth, but it talks about a full day mixed provider delivery model, and then it goes on to say that, and I didn't underline it on this one, that it year-round means a full calendar year, excluding weekend holidays, and approximately 286 days a year. So is this saying that with our pre-K students in particular, that they would have to be enrolled in pre-K for 286 days a year?
I will have to check on that for you, just to get the specifics on it. I don't know if Dr. Chesson may know off the top of her head. She does, so she can come down and answer that for us.
Sure, just briefly, the legislative intent of Senator Fields' bill is for school systems to work to implement. And so this does not impact LA4 or NSCCD, but this is for school systems to make some attempt and work towards what we recognize as best practices for early childhood. And so that mixed delivery model means that not all care for children would particularly happen at the school level, but maybe there are some approaches that school systems would want to work with local child care providers to ensure that summer access to child care. But the intent of the bill is really for school systems to think outside the box and provide child care to as many children as possible for that full year, full day model.
So just for clarity, so for pre-K, is it the intent that all pre-K students receive some type of educational delivery model to them for 286 days a year, no matter whether it's Head Start or whether it's, another provider, a private provider, et cetera?
This bill does not require that. It does not provide the funding for that. It is just asking for school systems to really be innovative in their approach, think outside the box. It does not expand the care of Head Start or the care of LA4. Those are still the same amount of days, same amount of hours. But it's asking for school systems to really think about that longer care for children and work towards that approach.
Thank you.
So Dr. Chesson, that work to develop language, is that, so
It gives you a little flexibility.
to the greatest extent possible?
Yes, sir. They just have a different way of saying it across the street.
So I was just going to say for us that we like this way because we do in EBR where we have, for example, we have an actual daycare in the school, what we call micro-center approach. So we like the way to be flexible in the iteration that way. And so because we put them in the school, they agree to professional development, those things. So we are able to kind of work through in this model. So we actually appreciate the latitude on this. So just wanted to share that everybody wants to see that model that is being given.
So I do have one other question. So on, trying to find the pages for you, is regarding subsection 2307, literacy assessment and screener. I don't know the page, it doesn't have pages, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 page, 2307. Literacy assessment and screener. Just some clarity, could you provide a little clarity for me here with those screeners? So at this time, for those students in grades 1 through 3, there would be a requirement for, I think the language I'm reading through quickly, there's going to be literacy screens that would be developed. I think there's going to be 3 screens done throughout the school year. And have you decided what that screen is going to be yet, or?
So that's the RFP that we've talked about for quite some time that we're engaging in to identify a vendor. What this legislation does from Representative Hughes, I believe, is puts in place a requirement now for that screener to be administered at the beginning of the year, at the middle of the year, and again at the end of the year. And so our original RFP did not include a requirement for that mid-year. We were seeking a requirement at the beginning of the year and end of year for some previous legislation that was passed in the 2021 legislative session. But with this newest edition, it will be required at the beginning, mid, and end, and that's that same RFP for literacy screeners that we've been talking about for quite some time. It's that same one that has not yet been identified.
Are there any other comments? Hearing none? No? Okay. We have a motion to receive and a second. Those in favor? Aye. That was our last one. appreciate everyone's time. Y'all have a great day. Be safe going home.